Have you ever finally found peace only to be accused of being cruel? There's this strange moment that happens when an empath begins to heal. You've spent months, maybe years, recovering from a relationship that drained every ounce of your energy. You've finally found some quiet, some stability. You're no longer reactive. You've stopped engaging with the chaos. You're simply peaceful. And that's when they call you cold, vindictive, even monstrous. Here's the paradox that nobody talks about. Your healing journey looks like calculated revenge to the narcissist. Your calm, the very peace you fought so hard to find, becomes the loudest confrontation they'll ever face. You're not trying to hurt anyone. You're just trying to breathe again. But to them, your silence screams louder than any argument ever could. Before we dive deeper, if this resonates with your soul's journey, please hit that like button and subscribe for more transformational content. Your support helps this message reach other souls who need to hear it. Carl Jung once said, "Where love reigns, there is no will to power. And where power predominates, love is lacking." And this is where we begin to understand something profound. What you experienced wasn't love, even though it felt like it. It was a power dynamic disguised as connection. And now that you've withdrawn your energy, that dynamic has collapsed, and they feel it as betrayal. Let me ask you something. Do you feel guilty right now? Even as you're finally choosing yourself, is there a voice inside whispering that maybe you're being too harsh, too distant? That if you were really a good person, you'd give them another chance? Here's what I need you to understand. The fact that you're asking yourself these questions proves you're not the narcissist. The narcissist never questions their impact. They don't lie awake wondering if they've been too cruel. But you do. You've been conditioned to believe that your worth is measured by how much you sacrifice. And that conditioning is exactly what kept you trapped. Think about all those nights you replayed conversations in your head. All those moments you tried to figure out what you did wrong. All those times you apologized for their behavior. That mental loop wasn't love. It was trauma bonding. Your nervous system was trying to make sense of something that never made sense. What we're going to explore together isn't a strategy for revenge. This isn't about how to hurt someone back. This is about understanding the psychological alchemy that happens when an empath finally reclaims their energy. This is about why your healing triggers such extreme reactions in the narcissist, and why that's actually proof you're on the right path. By the time we're done, you're going to understand that your guilt is the last chain keeping you bound to a dynamic that was slowly destroying you. And once you see the truth of what's really happening, the guilt will transform into something far more powerful: sovereignty. You're about to discover that the version of yourself you're becoming isn't cold. It's clear. It's not cruel. It's conscious. And it's not revenge. It's reclamation. Let's talk about something most people never see. There was an invisible contract in your relationship with the narcissist. You never signed it. You probably didn't even know it existed. But it was there, governing every interaction, every emotional exchange. Here's what that contract said. Your job was to provide emotional supply. Not love, not partnership, supply. Think about that word, supply. Like you were a resource to be extracted, not a person to be cherished. And the narcissist's world, their entire sense of self, was built on your reactions. Not on your love, on your reactions. When you were anxious about losing them, that fed them. When you were trying desperately to fix things, that fed them. Even when you were angry or hurt, that fed them. Because all of it proved they mattered. All of it confirmed their existence. It's like they were a black hole and your emotions were the light they consumed to feel real. Without that constant influx of your energy, they couldn't maintain the illusion of their own importance. Jung called this participation mystique, a merger of psyches where boundaries dissolve. In healthy relationships, there's some of this. We influence each other. We feel each other's emotions. But with a narcissist, this merger becomes parasitic. Your emotional system becomes an extension of theirs, constantly regulated to serve their needs. Think about how exhausting that was. You couldn't have a bad day without managing their reaction to your bad day. You couldn't have good news without making sure it didn't threaten their ego. You couldn't be authentically you because you were too busy being what they needed you to be. And now you've withdrawn. You've stopped providing supply, and their world is collapsing. Let me paint the picture of what's happening in their psychological landscape. Imagine someone who built their entire house on your foundation. Every wall, every room, every sense of structure, it all rested on your emotional availability. And now you've removed that foundation. They're not missing you. They're missing their reflection. Here's the truth they'll never admit, not even to themselves. They loved their reflection in you, not your reality. Your empathy acted as a mirror, where they could see themselves as important, powerful, needed. Without that mirror, they can't define who they are. This is the core of narcissistic injury. It's not about losing a relationship. It's about losing the reflective surface that allowed them to see themselves as superior. You were never a partner to them. You were a tool for self-confirmation. And when a tool stops working, they don't grieve it. They rage at it. This is why your healing feels like revenge to them. You haven't attacked them. You haven't exposed them. You've simply stopped being their mirror. And for someone whose entire identity depends on external reflection, that absence feels like annihilation. But here's where it gets complicated for you. Because you're sitting there, finally finding peace, and suddenly you're being accused of cruelty, of being cold, of changing into someone heartless. And part of you starts to believe it. That voice inside asks, am I being cruel? Have I become what I escaped? Let me tell you why that voice exists. It's not your intuition. It's conditioning. From childhood, you learned that love equals self-sacrifice. You learned that if you're good, you accommodate. If you're kind, you absorb other people's pain. You learned that boundaries are selfish and that your needs should always come second. Maybe you grew up in a household where one parent was emotionally volatile and the other was emotionally absent. So you became the mediator, the peacekeeper, the one who could read the room and adjust accordingly. You learned that your value was in your usefulness. Or maybe you were praised for being so mature or so understanding when you were just a child. And you internalized that praise as your identity. You became the person who doesn't need anything, who can handle everything, who makes everyone else comfortable. That internal voice saying, if I'm good, I'll go back. That's not wisdom. That's a trauma response dressed up as morality. Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And right now, you're in that pain. The pain of recognizing that what you called love was actually a slow erosion of self. The pain of seeing that your empathy was being weaponized against you. The pain of understanding that choosing yourself isn't cruelty, it's survival. Your guilt, it's withdrawal symptoms. You're detoxing from emotional over-identification. For years, you couldn't tell where your feelings ended and theirs began. You absorbed their moods, their chaos, their emptiness, and you thought that was connection. But it wasn't. It was contagion. And now your nervous system is learning something it's never known: peace. Real peace. Not the temporary calm between storms, but actual sustained peace. And it feels wrong because chaos has been your normal for so long. Your body is literally recalibrating. It's been in survival mode for so long that safety registers as danger. That's why you might feel anxious when things are going well. That's why peace can feel like the calm before the storm. Your nervous system is waiting for the other shoe to drop because it always has before. Here's what the narcissist perceives when you heal. They experience your boundary as betrayal, because in their mind, you don't exist as a separate person with separate needs. You exist as an extension of them, and extensions don't get to leave. When you stop absorbing their pain, they feel exposed, vulnerable, and they can't tolerate that feeling. So they project. They call your healing selfish. They frame your peace as punishment. They rewrite history so that you're the villain and they're the victim. And the tragic part, they actually believe it. Because accepting the truth that they built their entire identity on exploiting your empathy would shatter them. They'll tell everyone who will listen that you abandoned them, that you changed, that you're not the person they fell in love with. And in a way, they're right. You're not that person anymore, because that person was slowly disappearing under the weight of their needs. Jung observed, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The narcissist is irritated by your peace because it reflects the chaos within them. Your calm is the evidence of their dysfunction. Your growth is the proof of their stagnation. And you, the empath, are left holding this strange guilt for the crime of finally choosing yourself. But what if I told you that guilt is actually the doorway to your liberation? What if that uncomfortable feeling is your psyche's way of saying you're breaking free from programming that no longer serves you? The guilt isn't proof you're doing something wrong. It's proof you're doing something different. And different feels dangerous to a system that equated sameness with safety. Let's go deeper. Because to understand why your healing triggers such extreme reactions, we need to understand what's happening beneath the surface. We need to talk about shadows. Your nervous system right now is doing something extraordinary. It's detoxing from years of emotional contagion. And this isn't metaphorical, this is neuroscience. You have these things called mirror neurons. They're designed to help you understand and empathize with others. When someone smiles, your mirror neurons fire and you feel the impulse to smile back. It's beautiful, really. It's how we connect as human beings. But in an empath, these mirror neurons are hyperactive. You don't just notice emotions, you absorb them. You feel them in your body, as if they're your own. And when you're in relationship with a narcissist, your mirror neurons are firing constantly, trying to read their mood, anticipate their needs, manage their emotions. For years, you've been in a state of chronic empathy fatigue. Your nervous system never rested because it was always scanning for danger, always trying to regulate someone else's emotional state. And now, finally, it's getting to rest. But here's the thing. Peace can feel like loneliness to a nervous system addicted to chaos. You're used to high alert. You're used to drama. You're used to the adrenaline of walking on eggshells. And now there's just quiet. And sometimes that quiet feels empty. Not because anything's wrong, but because you're feeling yourself for the first time in years. This is the emotional detox. And it's not easy. You're separating what was never yours, their anger, their emptiness, their shame, from what's actually you. And in that separation, you discover something startling. You don't actually know who you are without them. You've been so focused on being what they needed that you forgot to be yourself. It's like you've been wearing a costume for so long that you forgot what your real face looks like. You've been performing a role, the understanding partner, the patient listener, the eternal optimist who believes they can change. And now that the show is over, you're standing backstage wondering who you are without the costume. This disorientation is normal. It's part of the process. You're not lost. You're found. You're just not used to being found yet. Now let's talk about shadows. Because both you and the narcissist are being forced to meet what you've been avoiding. Jung believed that we all have a shadow, or the parts of ourselves we deny, repress, or refuse to see. and relationships, especially dysfunctional ones, are mirrors for those shadows. The empath's shadow is the addiction to being needed. You tell yourself it's compassion, but underneath there's something else. There's a fear that if you're not useful, you're not lovable. A fear that if you're not fixing someone, you have no purpose. A fear that being ordinary, just being yourself without a cause to serve, isn't enough. You have a savior complex. And I say that with love, because I've been there. The empath often chooses relationships where they can be the hero, the rescuer, the one who sees the good in someone everyone else has given up on. It feels noble. It feels like love. But it's also a way of avoiding yourself. Because if you're always focused on saving them, you never have to face the question, who am I when I'm not needed? That question terrifies you more than you want to admit. Because your entire identity has been built on being indispensable, on being the one person who understands, on being the exception to everyone else's limitations. The narcissist's shadow is different, but complementary. Their shadow is the terror of insignificance. Beneath all the grandiosity, beneath all the demands for attention, is a void. An emptiness so profound that they can't look at it directly. So they build this elaborate structure of superiority to avoid feeling what's underneath, the fear that they don't matter, that they're not special, that they're fundamentally not enough. And you, with your empathy and your need to save, you provided the perfect escape from that void. Your attention filled the emptiness. Your emotional supply confirmed their significance. It was a perfect unconscious match. Your need to be needed met their need to be reflected. Your fear of being ordinary met their fear of being insignificant. Two wounded people creating a dynamic that kept both wounds from healing. Jung called this psychic compensation. When one person moves toward balance, it creates imbalance in a system that depended on dysfunction. Your healing, your movement toward wholeness, threatens the entire structure, because that structure required both of you playing your roles. The moment you step out of your role, the whole thing collapses, and the narcissist feels that collapse as your revenge. But it's not revenge. It's revelation. Both of you are being forced to see what was always there but carefully hidden. They're being forced to see their emptiness. You're being forced to see your addiction to sacrifice. This is uncomfortable truth territory. Most people don't want to acknowledge their part in dysfunctional dynamics. It's easier to be purely the victim. But healing requires honesty. And honesty means looking at how you participated, not to blame yourself, but to understand yourself. You chose this relationship. Not consciously, not deliberately, but you chose it. Your wounded parts recognized their wounded parts and said, "This is familiar. This is home." And trauma always feels like home until you heal enough to know what home should actually feel like. Let's talk about the illusion of power. The narcissist's power was never real. It was a magic trick that depended on your participation. They controlled through emotional manipulation, guilt, gaslighting, intermittent reinforcement. They kept you off balance so you'd keep reaching for stability that never came. But that kind of control isn't power. It's desperation masquerading as dominance. Real power doesn't need to manipulate. Real power doesn't need to diminish others to feel big. Real power is what you're discovering now, the ability to be calm in your own presence, to choose yourself without apology, to love without losing yourself. Your healing exposes the illusion, and that exposure is what they can't forgive. Because now the truth is visible. They were never powerful. They were terrified, and they needed you more than you ever needed them. Jung said, "People don't have ideas. Ideas have people." Both of you were possessed by a pattern, an archetypal dance of rescuer and victim, giver and taker. Neither of you chose it consciously. It chose you based on your wounds. But now you're waking up. You're seeing the pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The narcissist is experiencing what Jung called the mirror crisis. Your absence is forcing them to confront the unlived self, all the parts they've been avoiding. Without your reflection, they have to face themselves. And that's terrifying. Some narcissists respond with rage. They attack the mirror because the reflection is unbearable. They'll try to destroy your credibility, your reputation, your peace. Because if they can make you the villain, they don't have to face themselves as the void. They'll launch smear campaigns. They'll triangulate. They'll bring in flying monkeys to validate their narrative. They'll perform victimhood so convincingly that even people who know you might question your character. This is the narcissistic rage that happens when the supply is cut off. Others will try hoovering a false reconciliation. They'll promise change. They'll perform vulnerability. They'll say everything you wanted to hear for years. But it's not genuine transformation. It's a strategy to restore the supply. They might show up with apologies that sound perfect. They might cry. They might acknowledge everything they did wrong. And it will feel so validating that you'll want to believe them. But watch their actions, not their words. If they haven't done deep therapeutic work, if they haven't faced their own shadows, those words are just manipulation with better vocabulary. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The narcissist can't do that work. They're too afraid of what they'll find in the darkness. So they'd rather pull you back into the illusion than face themselves alone. But you're doing the work. You're making the darkness conscious. You're integrating your shadow. You're facing the uncomfortable truth that you participated in your own diminishment, not because you're weak, but because you were wounded. And wounded people seek familiar wounds. There's a loneliness in this freedom you're discovering. You've lost the unhealthy bond before finding authentic ones. And in that interim space, there's a void. But this void is different from emptiness. This is solitude, the expansive experience of being fully present with yourself. The loneliness comes because peace feels foreign. Your body doesn't trust safety yet. For years, safety meant hypervigilance. Relaxation meant danger was coming. Your nervous system is rewiring, but it takes time. You might notice yourself creating drama in your head when there is none in your life. You might find yourself drawn to intense situations or people. That's your nervous system seeking the familiar activation. It's been running on cortisol and adrenaline for so long that calm feels like death. But it's not death. It's rebirth. And rebirth requires the death of who you used to be. Jung said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important." And right now, you're learning a new language. The language of boundaries, the language of self-honor, the language of authentic needs. Not everyone speaks this language. So yes, you'll feel alone sometimes. But that aloneness is the birthplace of your true self. Now we enter the alchemy. This is where pain transforms into wisdom, where the wounded healer becomes the conscious healer. This is your individuation journey. Jung believed individuation was the central task of human life, becoming who you truly are, not who others need you to be. For the empath, this is revolutionary, because your entire identity has been built on being useful, being needed, being the one who holds everything together. But individuation asks a different question. Who are you when you're not performing these roles? You're shifting from caretaker identity to sovereign self. And sovereignty doesn't mean not caring. It means caring without losing yourself. It means your compassion comes from fullness, not from emptiness, trying to prove its worth. This is the integration of light and dark. You're not transcending your shadow, you're incorporating it. You're accepting that yes, you have needs. Yes, you have limits. Yes, you have darkness. And that doesn't make you less spiritual or less compassionate. It makes you human. It makes you whole. Wholeness replaces usefulness as your measure of worth. Think about what that means. For your entire life, you've measured your value by what you can do for others, by how much you can give, by how much pain you can absorb, by how many people need you. But wholeness says you matter because you exist, not because you're useful. This is a radical shift. It means you can have a day where you don't help anyone and you're still valuable. It means you can say no without explaining or justifying. It means you can prioritize your needs without guilt. You stop chasing closure from them and start creating peace within yourself. Because you realize now that closure is something you give yourself. It's not a conversation you need to have. It's not an apology you're waiting for. It's a decision you make to complete the story on your own terms. The transformation is subtle but seismic. You're moving from wounded healer to conscious healer. The wounded healer tries to fix in others what they can't face in themselves. The conscious healer recognizes that everyone's journey is their own. You can witness, you can support, but you can't do the work for them. And more importantly, you don't need to. This is perhaps the hardest lesson for the empath. You're so used to taking responsibility for other people's emotions that releasing that responsibility feels like abandonment. But it's not. It's honoring their autonomy. It's trusting that they have their own inner resources, even if they're not accessing them yet. Now let's talk about the emotional detox you're moving through. You're learning to separate what was never yours from what's actually you. For years, you absorbed their anger, their fear, their shame. You felt it in your body. You carried it like it was your responsibility to transmute. But it wasn't. And it isn't. Part of healing is giving back what was never yours to carry. Energetically, emotionally, you're returning their darkness to them. Not as an attack, but as a boundary. You're saying, this is yours. I can't carry it anymore. And that's when you discover something profound. You're not losing empathy. You're refining it into discernment. There's a difference between feeling with someone and feeling for them. Feeling with is compassion. You recognize their pain while maintaining your center. Feeling for is absorption. You take on their pain as if it's your identity. You're learning to feel with, not for. You're learning that compassion without boundaries isn't love. It's self-abandonment disguised as virtue. Let me give you a practical example. Before, if someone told you about their problem, you would immediately feel their distress in your body. Your stomach would tighten. Your chest would constrict. You would take on their anxiety as your own. And then you would scramble to fix their problem so you could feel okay again. Now you're learning to listen without absorbing. You can hear their pain without making it yours. You can offer support without taking responsibility for their emotions. You can say, that sounds really hard, without immediately trying to solve it. This is discernment. This is mature empathy. This is compassion with boundaries. This is where power gets redefined. For so long, you thought power meant being strong enough to endure anything. Power meant never needing anything. Power meant being the rock everyone else leaned on while you slowly eroded. But that's not power. That's depletion calling itself strength. Real power is knowing when to say no. Real power is being soft without being weak. Real power is allowing yourself to need without apologizing for it. Real power is the integration of empathy and logic, softness and strength, vulnerability and boundaries. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes," and you're waking up. You're looking inside and discovering that everything you were searching for out there, validation, worthiness, love, it was always in here. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy proving your value through service. Let's talk about the alchemy Jung loved so much. In alchemical tradition, there are 3 stages: nigredo, albedo, and rubedo. The blackening, the whitening, and the reddening. Nigredo is the dark night of the soul, the dissolution, the breaking down of everything you thought you knew. That was your time in the relationship and the aftermath when you first started seeing the truth. Everything felt black, hopeless, like you'd never feel okay again. This was necessary. The old structures had to break down completely before new ones could form. Your identity as the caretaker had to dissolve. Your belief that love means sacrifice had to shatter. Your hope that they would change had to die. Albedo is the purification, the emergence of clarity, the whitening. This is where you are now. You're seeing clearly for the first time. The illusions are burning away. The fog is lifting. You're beginning to understand what happened and why. This stage is characterized by insight. Suddenly, things make sense. You see the patterns. You understand the dynamics. You recognize your own part in the dance. This clarity is liberating, but it's also painful because you're seeing how long you stayed in something that was hurting you. And rubedo is the final stage, the reddening, the return of vitality, the reintegration of all parts into a new whole. You're not back to who you were before you're becoming something entirely new. Someone who has been through the fire and emerged transformed. This is where you're headed. You're not there yet, but you can see it on the horizon. You can feel the stirrings of vitality returning, the color coming back into your life, the passion reigniting, but this time directed toward yourself and your own growth. This is the alchemy of integration. Healing isn't escape from darkness. It's transformation through it. You don't transcend your shadow, you integrate it. You don't bypass the pain, you metabolize it into wisdom. And in this process, something remarkable happens. You develop what I call emotional sovereignty. The highest form of revenge that isn't revenge at all, it's neutrality. They can no longer trigger you. Their words don't hook you. Their manipulation doesn't land. Not because you're numb, but because you're psychologically immune. Your nervous system no longer responds to the old patterns because you've rewired it through healing. You no longer fight the storm, you become the sky. The storm still happens down there, the narcissist still rages, still manipulates, still plays victim. But you're above it, not superior to it, just separate from it, separate, witnessing it without being swept into it. This serenity is the ultimate redefinition of power, not domination, not control, non-reactivity, the ability to remain calm in your center while chaos swirls around you. And here's what I need you to understand. This isn't revenge. This is revelation. Your existence now exposes what was hidden. Not because you're trying to expose anything, you're just living in truth. And truth is like light. It reveals what darkness was hiding. The narcissist faces their mirror, your peace shows them their chaos. The empath faces their truth, you see now how you participated in your own diminishment. This mutual unveiling ends the unconscious contract. The game can't continue because you're no longer playing. Your evolution is their accountability. Not because you're punishing them, but because your transformation is evidence of what they refuse to do. You did the inner work. You faced the darkness. You integrated the shadow. And they didn't. They can't. And your progress highlights their stagnation. But this isn't about them anymore. This is about you reclaiming yourself. This is about the new relationship you're building with power. Power that's no longer reactionary, but intentional. Power that doesn't need to prove itself. Power that simply is. You're embodying calm assertiveness. Your boundaries don't need words anymore. They're in your energy, in your presence, in the way you carry yourself. People can feel that you're no longer available for dysfunction, and they respond accordingly, either with respect or they remove themselves from your life. Both outcomes are fine, because you're no longer holding on to connections that require you to abandon yourself. Jung said it perfectly. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that's what's happening. You're meeting yourself, maybe for the first time, without the distortion of someone else's needs coloring your perception, without the performance of who you thought you had to be. Just you. Raw. Real. Whole. So where does this leave us after the pain? After the revelation, after the integration, what remains, you remain. But not the version of you that entered that relationship. Not the version that believed love meant sacrifice. Not the version that thought boundaries were selfish. A new version, an integrated version, a sovereign version. Carl Jung, empath, and personal development intersect most powerfully in this moment of transformation. Because what you're experiencing isn't just personal healing, it's archetypal evolution. Jung believed that sensitive souls, empaths like you, are instruments of collective transformation. When you heal, you don't just change your own life. You shift the energetic pattern in the collective unconscious. Every empath who refuses exploitation forces humanity to evolve emotionally. Every person who chooses wholeness over usefulness challenges the archetypal pattern of giver versus taker. You're part of something bigger than your individual story. Think about the ripple effect of your healing. Your children, if you have them, will grow up witnessing healthy boundaries. They'll learn that love doesn't mean self-abandonment. They'll see a model of self-respect and emotional sovereignty. Your friends will notice the change in you. Some will be inspired to do their own work. Others will feel uncomfortable because your growth highlights their stagnation. And that's okay. You're not responsible for making everyone comfortable with your evolution. Your future partners will encounter a version of you that knows her worth, that doesn't accept breadcrumbs, that doesn't mistake intensity for intimacy, that requires respect, reciprocity, and genuine emotional availability. Jung wrote, "The world hangs on a thin thread, and that thread is the psyche of man." Your psyche matters. Your healing matters, not just to you, but to everyone who will encounter you going forward. You're going to model something different now, something most people have never seen. You're going to show them what it looks like to be empathetic without being a martyr, compassionate without being depleted, open without being exploited. The healed empath becomes a guide. Not a savior, you're done with that role, but a mirror of possibility. Your existence proves that transformation is possible, that you can emerge from dysfunction and build something beautiful, that the wound can become wisdom. Let's talk about relationships now, because you might be wondering, will I ever connect deeply again? After everything I've learned about boundaries and sovereignty, will I be able to love? And the answer is yes. But differently. After individuation, relationships form on resonance, not rescue. You're no longer attracted to people who need fixing. You're no longer drawn to potential over reality. You're no longer trying to prove your worth through service. You attract those who mirror wholeness, not need, because you're whole now, and wholeness recognizes wholeness. You're looking for a quality of consciousness, someone doing their own work, someone who has faced their own shadows, someone who doesn't need you to complete them, but chooses you to complement them. True intimacy requires this equality. Without it, you're back in the old pattern. One person growing, one person draining, one person giving, one person taking. And you know now how that story ends. So you wait. You trust. You're patient with the process of finding authentic connection. Because you're not lonely anymore, you're in relationship with yourself. And that relationship is so nourishing that you're no longer willing to compromise it for the illusion of connection. You stop chasing people and start magnetizing peace. There's a shift in your energy. You're not seeking anymore. You're not proving anymore. You're just being. And people who resonate with that frequency find you. People who are ready for real connection, not drama disguised as passion. Your new identity is the integrated self. You're no longer defined by what you give, but by who you are. And who you are is enough. Not because you've achieved anything, not because you've healed perfectly, but because you exist, because you're here, because you matter inherently, not conditionally. This is the death of the old belief, I'm only lovable if I'm useful, and the birth of the new truth, I'm lovable because I exist. The old you believed that compassion without boundaries was love. The integrated you knows that compassion without boundaries is self-abandonment disguised as virtue. Real love includes self-love. Real compassion includes self-compassion. Real care includes self-care. And none of that is selfish. It's sustainable. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And you're living that privilege now. You've met yourself beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the roles, beneath all the performances. You've met the core of who you are. And that core is not what you feared. You're not selfish. You're not cold. You're not cruel. You're sovereign. You're boundaried. You're whole. And those qualities only look like flaws to people who benefited from your fragmentation. Now let's address the resolution, the stillness after the storm. Because you need to hear this clearly. Healing is not revenge. It's reclamation. You're not taking anything from the narcissist by healing. You're taking back what was always yours. Your energy, your power, your peace, your identity. These things were never theirs to take. But you handed them over because you thought that's what love required. Now you know differently. And that knowledge has liberated you from a prison you didn't even realize you were in. The final state of healing is profound. No resentment, no reaction, only recognition. You see them clearly now without the fog of trauma bonding or the distortion of hope. You see them as they are deeply wounded people who haven't done their inner work. And you feel compassion for that without feeling responsible for it. You recognize the pain that created them without needing to fix it. You see the void they're running from without needing to fill it. You understand the fear that drives them without needing to absorb it. Revenge ends where consciousness begins. And you're conscious now. You see the whole picture. The patterns, the projections, the unconscious contract. And because you see it, you're free from it. The empath walks away not to hurt, but to return home to self. And that home is not a place. It's a state of being. It's the internal environment where you're no longer at war with yourself, where your needs matter, where your voice counts, where your peace is protected. You're not abandoning them. You're choosing you. And if they perceive that as cruelty, that perception belongs to them. You can't control how they interpret your healing. You can only commit to your own wholeness. Here's what I want you to feel in your body right now. You are not cruel for choosing peace. You are not cold for setting boundaries. You are not guilty for your transformation. Your healing doesn't punish them. It frees you both from an unconscious prison. They may not see it that way. They may spend years blaming you for their emptiness. But their journey is not your responsibility. Your journey is, and your journey is beautiful. Painful, yes. Lonely at times, yes. but ultimately beautiful, because you're becoming real, authentic, whole. You're integrating all the parts you were taught to hide. You're honoring all the needs you were taught to deny. You're embodying all the power you were taught to give away. This is Carl Jung, empath, and personal development at its most profound. The personal becomes archetypal. Your individual healing contributes to collective evolution. You're not just fixing your own life, you're rebalancing an ancient pattern. You're proving that empaths don't have to be martyrs, that sensitivity doesn't equal weakness, that feeling deeply doesn't mean drowning in everyone else's emotions. You're creating a new template, and others will follow. They'll see what you've done and know it's possible for them too. Your transformation gives permission for others to transform. Your boundaries show others they can have boundaries too. Your peace demonstrates that peace is possible after chaos. You are the evidence that healing is real. The narcissist will tell a different story. They'll paint themselves as the victim of your coldness. They'll rewrite history to cast you as the villain. They'll gather allies to confirm their narrative. And none of that changes the truth of what actually happened. You know the truth. You lived it. And you don't need anyone else to validate your experience. Healing has given you the gift of trusting yourself, of knowing your reality is real, even when others deny it. This is the transformation, from self-doubt to self-trust, from external validation to internal knowing, from fragmented to whole. And it's not a destination, it's a practice. Some days you'll feel powerful and clear. Other days, you'll question everything. That's normal. Healing isn't linear, it's spiral. You'll revisit old wounds at deeper levels. You'll discover new layers of conditioning to release. You'll have moments where you wonder if you've made any progress at all. But you have. Even on the hard days you have. Because you're aware now. You see the patterns. You catch yourself slipping into old roles and you course correct. That's growth. That's integration. That's Carl Jung, empath, and personal development in action. You're not perfect. You're not meant to be. You're whole. And wholeness includes the broken parts, the healing parts, and the healed parts, all existing together. You're a masterpiece in progress, a work of art still being created. And that's exactly as it should be. So when the guilt creeps in, and it will sometimes remind yourself, I'm not cruel. I'm boundaried. I'm not cold. I'm calm. I'm not selfish. I'm self-honoring. And those distinctions matter. The narcissist can't see those distinctions because they can't see you as separate from them. But you can. And you do. And that clarity is your freedom. You're writing a new story now, one where you're the protagonist of your own life, not a supporting character in someone else's drama, one where your needs are honored, not sacrificed, one where your peace is protected, not negotiated away. And in this new story, you get to decide who has access to you. You get to decide what kind of energy you allow into your space. You get to decide what love looks like, what respect feels like, what connection means. This is sovereignty. This is integration. This is what it means to come home to yourself. If this resonated with your journey, I want you to know something. You're not alone in this transformation. Thousands of people are walking this path with you. Empaths around the world are waking up, setting boundaries, and reclaiming their sovereignty. In the comments below, share your moment of awakening. What was the instant you realized you had to choose yourself? What was the shift that changed everything? Your story matters. Your voice matters. And someone reading this needs to hear that they're not alone. Was it a specific phrase they said that finally broke through the fog? Was it a moment of clarity in the middle of the night? Was it watching yourself shrink one too many times? Whatever it was, share it. Because your truth might be the mirror someone else needs to see their own. This community exists because we're all part of the same collective evolution. We're rewriting the script that says empaths must sacrifice themselves to be valuable. We're proving that sensitivity is strength, not weakness. We're showing that boundaries are love, not coldness. Subscribe to continue your individuation journey. We're exploring the psychology of liberation together. The intersection of Jungian depth psychology, modern neuroscience, and practical wisdom for empaths. This is about more than healing from narcissistic relationships. It's about understanding yourself at the deepest level. Your healing matters, not just to you, but to the collective consciousness we're all part of. Every person who does this work shifts the energy for everyone. You're contributing to something larger than your individual story. So thank you. Thank you for having the courage to choose yourself. Thank you for doing the inner work even when it's painful. Thank you for refusing to abandon yourself anymore. You're exactly where you need to be, and the journey ahead is going to be extraordinary. Welcome home to yourself.